It is 3:11 p.m. and I'm still sipping my coffee, Aaron. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. Going through some job troubles, so my mental is kind of a little bit negative, but we'll power through it.
Yeah. Are you in search of a new job currently?
I am.
Mm. Is it are the struggles related to troubles in finding a new job or pre-existing troubles at your current job?
Uh, I don't know, man. It's just like general mental fatigue related to all aspects of the things you just mentioned. Nothing specific.
Mm. And do you feel whenever you get in your new position you'll be liberated of that mental fatigue?
I don't know, but I there's this tweet. It's like um, desire is like a contract with yourself to be miserable until you get the thing you want. I guess that's what I'm feeling right now.
And what's the thing you want?
A new job.
New job. So you will be liberated then of your mental angst.
Of some of it at least. But the new job will inevitably be harder. Much harder than what I'm doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I'm not used to working, like actually working hard like that. So I gotta shake off the cobwebs. Because I've been
Well,
like almost, cultivating laziness and getting into bad habits. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why I'm like my mental is like fucked because it's like against my brand to be lazy or my own brand that I have with myself rather. So yeah,
I see. Yeah. Well, I think I think you alluded to it, but maintaining like passion in your personal hobbies and a degree of, you know, um like an inability to accept mediocrity even in the things that like don't matter to you financially or in like a big part besides just like self-enjoyment is a good way to kind of keep the cobwebs permanently off and keep yourself always fun-tuned, because even in like jujitsu, like you've been going uh on a routine basis and working hard, presumably, like the cobwebs aren't fully clogging up the machinery.
yeah. I mean, I haven't like given up on life or anything. It's just like my brain, the hamster wheel in my brain, the hamster is like sipping on a fruity drink on some island somewhere, and he's not running in a circle like he should be.
Yeah, well, okay. So I guess, I was still kind of deciding between the three. We made an agreement, just so the audience knows before we started this, what the topic would be. And the agreement was that I would pick three topics, and Aaron would call the list down and give us one. But I think fate has chosen our topic today, which is kind of, I guess we've sort of talked about this before, but it's sort of like the meaning of life question. And as written, it is basically is freedom the highest good, and if not, what is? So I think with your current struggles in the job and where maybe you've envisioned your goals and stuff, do those align with a higher degree of freedom? Because what you've described to me so far, it's like maybe not. You said it's going to be harder, more demanding, more hours. So maybe freedom isn't the highest good.
But I chose to do that, right? So it was of my own free will that I chose to do that. I mean, not to be pedantic, but it's because I have freedom that I can choose to get a different job, right? Because it's not like I don't have to pay for to feed any kids or any chronic medical things or whatever that would like preclude me from changing my financial stability. So, because I'm probably like in the most, this is probably like the most stable situation I could possibly be in, is what I'm in right now. So,
Yeah. So then I guess a lot of people have different ideas of freedom too, which makes this a challenging question. And I was sort of just pitching it in a devil's advocate sense earlier, but when I think of freedom, I like my idea end game sort of thing is like basically as much land as you can't really see your neighbors if you don't want to, sort of thing, and a degree of self-reliance such that like fluctuations in food supply won't really affect you, stuff like that. Power wouldn't affect you. So that's sort of my idea of freedom, and it seems like it's more of a maybe antiquated, like rough and tough, rootin' and tootin' Westerner sort of thing. But um, when someone says like freedom to you, what do you think of?
Well, what's the only thing you can't get more of in this life?
Time.
Time. So for me, freedom is having complete control over your time, or at least to the highest degree possible. So the common like definition of financial freedom is that you can live like within reason the life that you want to live without having to do a job or air quotes or like anything you don't want to do to support that lifestyle, or I don't know, just freedom to experience time the way you want to, as much as, yeah, to the maximum degree possible.
Yeah, I guess in my vision of freedom, that is sort of implied as well. Because
I mean,
like I
yeah, like
said,
my definition is like a superset of your, like all of the stuff you said is like included in my definition. I think
yeah, yeah, yeah.
mine's like the most broad definition
I
possible.
think we can both probably agree then that like the vision that I have of freedom more or less is aligned with kind of how the first bit of like The Hobbit is written, where they're describing like the Hobbit lifestyle, where they kind of just like eat and smoke and drink tea and talk to each other all day. It's like, yeah, that's sort of what I envision freedom as. But then there's also a degree of like um you have to be involved in things that like sort of challenge you, but like self-imposed challenges, uh, and be well socially connected as well. So there's some sort of like basic requirements I think that you have to integrate into your idea of freedom, and I mean you're obviously constrained by those, and as you said earlier, not to be pedantic, but there is a level of like basic things that you have to meet, and you're not free to really disregard any of those in a sense. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I call that gravity. So, like, gravity keeps us on Earth, right?
Yeah.
Like, I can't just float away because gravity's holding me down. And, like, to break free of gravity, you have to, like, go on a rocket ship. It takes so much energy to break free of gravity, like, for example, on Earth. But, like, on the moon, with, like, low gravity, you can jump and jump, like, 10 feet in the air or whatever. There's less resistance, so you don't need a rocket to get off the, like, a huge rocket to get off the moon. But, like, in like your normal life, gravity is things like rent, obligations to friends and family, um, like your preconceived notions of yourself is gravity. All of the more stuff that like that you have in your life, the less you can do. So like the maximum gravity would be like you're strapped for cash and you're trying to feed all of your kids and
And
you
you're
have
having
this
horrible
chronic
heroin
you have
withdrawals.
this, yeah, chronic medical issue. Like that's the, like you basically all of your time is spent like trying to support those things, whereas like the most minimal amount of gravity of your life, I guess, would be to have financial freedom and have like perfect health and perfect relationships and no consequences for your actions. So obviously gravity is a little bit of gravity is good, right? Because you don't want to float up into space, but too much gravity is not good because you'll be crushed and you won't be able to move. But it's, I don't know. I don't. How do we get into that conversation? I can't even remember.
So essentially, the overarching, I mean, I guess realistically, how we do these podcasts is we sort of stray from the topic and then just like you know title the podcast whatever big topics we got into. But the basic topic is freedom the highest good?
No, I mean
And
not that. Like, how do we get into like
yeah,
specifically
yeah,
the gravity tangent or
yeah.
whatever?
So as I was saying, the basic topic is freedom the highest good? But then I said that there's basic human needs that
Oh,
you
right.
have to meet, and not to get pedantic, but that implies a degree of like things that you can't really disregard. Thus, you could conceptualize it as being enslaved by these basic needs that kind of need to be met, or else you're
Right.
not going like you know like social, for example. If you're not socially tapped in, you're going to be living, by all accounts, I think, a lower quality of life. And there might be like specific examples of maybe people um who have autism or something might subjectively get a higher level of satisfaction, maybe acutely, by not being in social situations. But I think long term, as that plays out, you see quality of life degrade. So there's things that you basically can't ignore. um but and like I said, I think it's important, like from a realistic standpoint, pedantics aside, to integrate those into your you know concept of what you think freedom is, right? So if I had to alter kind of what I said earlier with the whole land and not being able to see your neighbors if you don't like them, sort of thing, it's like, yeah, yeah, true. But I'd have a big family around me, and I'd like to have neighbors that I enjoy being around, and hosting dinner parties and having people and whatnot. But the basic, how we got into that, and the basic thing that I was trying to say was essentially, there's things that you can't ignore, and we could list them out if it's
Yeah, okay. Yeah, the
valuable. But
gravity. That's what's yeah, that's I
yeah,
call
yeah,
that gravity in my head.
yeah,
So
it's a good analogy. I
for
like it.
me,
Well, one
like,
of the things.
go ahead.
Go on.
I was just gonna
Uh,
say, for me, like the main gravity, I guess, is rent. Rent's the big one, and then phone bill, utility bill, um, yeah, and then those are like the big three, and then but rent is huge, man. If I didn't
yeah.
have to pay rent, that would be like owning property is a huge, huge plus.
One of the things you said when you were describing gravity, and you might not have meant it, but I'd be interested for some clarification, was I think you were describing like an ideal image of either freedom or just like your ideal world, and you said no consequences for your actions. Do you want to describe what you meant by that?
I mean, to truly be free, like, and like not free, not like think of free. Don't think of freedom as like a good thing. Just think of freedom as the thing in itself. Like true freedom would be like I can just go around and do whatever I want and not face any repercussions from anything.
I would have to disagree with that. Um, and
I mean,
basically,
I'm just using like it's not like what I think freedom should be. I think it's like the purest like abstract definition of freedom.
I think the purest abstract definition of freedom is that it kind of how it's described in Genesis, where, like, once Adam and Eve ate of the forbidden fruit, their eyes were open to like the ugliness of the world, and they're able to eat the fruit and suffer the consequences, but there's no way to remove consequences. So if you say that freedom is like being able to do whatever you want without consequences, I would argue that that's like an artificial world, and it's not actually
Yeah, it's
freedom.
it's the abstract definition in like some hypothetical world where you would have no like because so basically what I'm trying to get at is there's no such thing as like the highest level of freedom. It's the highest level of freedom within the degrees or the constraints of the
But
world we live in, basically.
I'm okay. I guess I'm just confused as to the utility of the scenario you're drawing, because what I'm understanding is that that would be freedom for one person exactly, and
Yes.
it would be. But I think it would be a constrained freedom, or like a perverted, changed definition of freedom. Because I think the purest form of freedom is that you can do whatever the fuck you want to. I have firearms in my house that I could realistically take and go, kill somebody, a human being, with, and face those consequences. Or maybe not. I could. Well, actually, what I was gonna say is you could like run from the law, but you'd still be facing the consequences. The consequence of your action is now you're a nomad and a person under investigation. So, that in my eyes, that's the highest form of freedom. Is you can do
Yeah,
whatever you want
I
to
agree
do,
with
the
you.
ugliest or the coolest things. You can go climb mountains that are ill advised, or you can go torture and go on a rampage killing spree, and spanning the spectrum of like the coolest things humans have done to like the worst things humans have done, but you have to face those consequences. Is my
Yeah, I
idea of
mean, like
freedom.
that's what freedom means in the real world. Like my definition is like in the abstract, like philosophical sense. Just considering the notion of freedom. Like obviously, it's not possible to achieve that kind of freedom in real life. So, but I think it's useful to go from the first principles of a thing like that because it gives you because most things aren't cut and dry at all. Like from like getting from science to like putting it and building it, like there's like limitations and shortcuts and expenses and okay, maybe we can build it exactly like the scientific theory, but we can't mass produce it, stuff like that. So, but yeah, like as a mental exercise, I try to think of things in the abstract first. But yeah, but
Yeah,
like I agree, I totally agree with your definition though. Like obviously in real life, like no matter what you do, you're gonna face consequences, even if even if the consequence is like completely unknown to you, like me giving like $5 to charity, and then some butterfly effect happens, and whatever, and somebody's life is completely changed by that $5, and they do good things, and maybe it circles back around to me, like those kind of consequences too that are totally unperceived by you.
yeah. Funnily enough, I think that kind of feeds back to our conversation about like the whole network strategy that we were talking about. Like you set up all those things beforehand and do good to people such that like in the future, those little things, I mean, you're guessing as to what the consequences are going to be in the future, which is, favorable connections for you, but it's like you don't know how far that's going to go sort of thing. And like little connections early can mean the world to people later, especially if you keep touching up with them.
Yep.
But so then back to the original question, is freedom the highest good? And if so, in what form? So like, realistic freedom in the real world versus the abstract freedom versus like uh, you know, quote unquote wage cuck freedom. Is it the highest good?
I guess the question we have to ask first is what is good? Is it something that's not bad, or can good exist? Can good exist just by itself? In other words, like, does there have to be evil for there to be good?
Does there have to be evil for there to be good? See, these are questions that I would love to have like a classically trained theologian here, as well as like somebody that knows their shit in like philosophy, like straight up all the philosophies,
I
and
guess
just could.
I just want us to like come to like a common definition of what we think, or like a a working definition of what good is. Because if you think good is something and I think it's a different thing, we're both gonna think something is. We're gonna have a different chain of reasoning for how we get to the highest good.
Okay, so here's where I'm stuck though. I believe there is good. I believe there is evil. Do I believe that there has to be evil for there to be good? I'm not sure. Like I don't know how to go about like thinking about a proof for that. You know what I mean? Or like where I would base that on.
I'll start with the biblical example. Like you even mentioned it already. Like Adam and Eve were like living this boring life. They didn't had no conception of good and evil. Like they were just existing. But
Yep.
they didn't realize what good was until she like Eve ate the apple and like talked to the snake or whatever.
Right.
So I think good doesn't exist without evil. Or like good exists but you don't understand it without the context of evil.
I'm gonna crack open the Bible and see, because I do agree on first pass with what you just said, but I want to get the passages up
But I mean
from the
that's just
Garden
one
of
example though.
Eden.
Like I'm sure that's just like the canonical example because it's like the most important book in Western literature. But I mean, we can use Lord of the Rings as an example. Like, how do we quantify like how good the people in the Shire were living without understanding that Mordor was far in the east? Like, they don't know. Like Frodo and Sam and Merry and Pippin don't know how good they have it until they go outside in the real world or in we'll call it the real world and learn about all the twisted stuff out there.
Yeah, it's odd because God God commanded them not to eat of the tree or they'll surely die. So they had, like you said, that like these hobbits knew of Mordor. They like, it's actually very interesting reading the Fellowship and having read The Hobbit recently. The emphasis, kind of like in Harry Potter, that they place on like names and words. Like, yo, don't fucking say that here. Like, Frodo was like, oh man, I haven't eaten in forever. I'm gonna end up looking like a wraith. And then Strider looks at him and is like, "Bro, shut the fuck up! Like, don't say that W word ever again here." And it's really interesting, like the emphasis that they place on like evil names and stuff, because I think it highlights the juxtaposition between transient knowledge of evil, where God just says like, "Yo, don't eat of that tree or else you're gonna die," and it's like, yeah, I can sort of conceptualize death, like that's a bad thing, versus like once your eyes are open to it, you're like, okay, this is like you're on a completely different dimension. Like you couldn't even conceptualize it before.
Yeah, and language is important because of that. And like it, language for most people is like the expression of thinking. So if your language is limited to like 100 words, you won't be able to think about complicated things, right? Because you just don't have whatever. You don't have the scope of language to describe it. Like, what if the only color was blue? But yeah,
Yeah.
it's like
So
that's that like the Voldemort example is just uh, like an extrapolated form of that. Like we know that we need language to describe stuff, but then language is so powerful that describing something and naming it and thinking about it like gives life to the evil idea, I guess,
yeah.
or
So
legitimacy or something.
yeah, certainly. It demonstrates that you have belief in it, which probably just gives it more power. But what I was gonna say regarding the question of the existence of like good without evil, it doesn't really appear that the good's ever going to appear without evil, but I think that's sort of just like human nature. So I don't think it's like one has like I don't think that they depend on each other, but I think it's just inevitable that evil's gonna crop up. Like there might be transient periods that evil's, like sort of like with how we treat AIDS nowadays. You get the viral load to like sub perceptible levels sort of thing, and they can't transmit it even if like you have sex with somebody. Um, so I think it's sort of like that. Like there's times of prosperity where evil is just like not there sort of thing, but it's always gonna come back sort of, just human nature. Like people have greed, they have these sinful thoughts, and it's gonna manifest itself at some point. And I mean the Bible clearly tells us that evil's like well established. So
Okay,
and
so we've established that you can't have good without evil. So then let's say
does it make sense what I'm saying though? Like
yes.
I don't think you can have good without evil, but I don't think it's like a mathematical thing like, if evil then good. So like I don't
Okay.
think it's like an equivalence like that, but I think it just
But
like
but you can't understand one without the other, let's say. Can we agree
yes,
on
and
that?
that's the thing. It's the appreciation. It's
Okay.
like you're not going to appreciate the good without the evil.
Okay, so here's my next thing. In Dante's Inferno, Dante goes on this adventure and he goes into hell and there's like 9 circles. Each one is like more like twisted punishments than the last, okay? And at the
Hmm.
very bottom in the pit where Satan's like chewing on people, the most evil, heinous um, deeds were people that betrayed people. So I think Judas was there, and then um, Dante. I gotta Google the other two dudes because I can't remember. But basically, he's saying the most evil thing you can do is betray somebody. So I'm gonna say, in like going from our um, definition that we established, that you can't understand good without evil. we can't understand the highest good without at least thinking about what the lowest evil is, right? Oh yeah, Brutus was there too, I think. Okay, yeah, Brutus, Judas, and uh, who else? Some random dudes from mythology that I didn't know about. But um, do you think that's reasonable though? That like the lowest form of evil is betraying somebody that trusts you?
So, like I said it again, I don't have the classical training to be able to like think of these from like first principles and like philosophy. So to me, in like the real world, it's always seemed to me that like the worst thing that you could do to somebody would be like rape or murder or like, torture sort of thing. So
Okay, so let me or go ahead.
what I was about to say is like beyond like just heinous crimes like that, yes, it does seem like adultery, betrayal, stuff like that is very high up there on the list just from like a gut instinctual feeling. But I have no way how to even begin to explain that like biblically or from a philosophical standpoint. But I can um I guess like what's I don't want to say pathologically because that means not what I want it to mean, but like um relating to pathos, relating to the emotional side of an argument. With that regard, I can agree with what you just said, but with regards to ethos and logos, I have no way to begin to explain how I agree.
Okay, so at least let's just think of the like that one example is that one of the great magnitudes of evil is betraying somebody that trusts you. Okay, so
Hmm.
let's just keep that in the back of our heads. So what would be I guess the direct opposite of that? Would it be like unconditional love basically or unconditional service to somebody?
Yeah, I think so. Kind of a lot of like what Jesus did, like even when he knew his homies were gonna betray him, like he was still there, breaking bread with them, loving them, and yeah, I think that it's like fostering trust in people, never like being the reason that people start having trust issues, sort of thing. Like being the complete antithesis of that.
Okay, so I guess like we'll never we like in this like let's say hypothetically we would know what Jesus was thinking in that situation like why did he do that? Did he do that because he wanted to? Did he do that because he had to? Was there some other reason why he was breaking bread with the people he knew was going to betray him? So I guess what I'm getting at is like if he did that because he wanted to, that means that the highest good arose from his freedom of choice.
Yeah,
So I guess
exactly.
freedom is like a precursor for the highest good. So I guess the answer is no. Freedom is not the highest good, but you need freedom in order to accomplish the highest good. I guess we're using the definitions we've come up with.
Yeah, I think the highest good is there's a word for this. Let me feel free to keep talking while I'm googling this. There's a holy word, meek. The word meek, like meekness, meek, I think is like sort of close to the highest good. It's a concept of strength brought under control, or like a bridled horse was kind of the image they were going for there. So and you probably hear a lot of this in like jujitsu, and it's basically the concept of like, despite the fact that I could fuck you up right now for no reason, I'm gonna use that power to like make sure that that never happens. I'm gonna use that power to make sure that no turds come up in here and try to like just start beating people up for no reason, sort of thing.
Mm,
So I think that's the highest good, kind of like what you said. You have that freedom of choice, but you consistently make the quote unquote good choice. So it's like you said, a precursor.
yeah, I guess. Yeah, I guess my personal definition is like I guess the highest good is not freedom directly, but you need freedom in order to accomplish that. So
It also depends on what you mean by good, like you said, because like I
yeah,
think
I mean
in
like
a
using
in
the
a
definition that I came up with
society,
right now,
if
but
you're talking about a society of people, I think freedom's the highest good that you can afford to your people. But if you're talking about a person, just being subject to freedom, I think should be a given. So it's not a good that you've done. It's something that you should just that's how people should be existing, as free citizens. So I think it's more along the concept of meekness, being gentle despite the fact that you're as Ziz would say, the late Ziz, a sick cunt.
So basically, just mastery over yourself.
I think so, yeah. Discipline.
But
Because
mastery over yourself because you chose to be that way, though.
yeah, exactly. I think you
Not because you think you have to do it, because you want to do it. I guess.
yeah,
So
I think there's
intention is important.
a lot of power in that choice, because it's like another question that you could ask is like, okay, um, if there's something that I force you to do it, so you don't get to choose, but it's a quote unquote good thing. Is it actually a no quotes good thing that you've done? Did you do a good thing just because you were forced to do it, or does the good arise from the choice? And just totally ignore the fact that maybe I
Yeah,
chose to
yeah.
make you do the good thing.
I don't know. I've asked myself this question before, but I haven't come to a reasonable conclusion.
Yeah,
Because, like, I guess it has to be both. It has to be both things. Because if I did like some fucked up thing, but I thought I was doing it to help somebody, then it's still a bad thing. But if I do a good thing, if I inadvertently do a good thing, but I was meaning to hurt somebody, it's a good thing, but like
yeah. Well, they
judged from
do
a
say that.
morality standpoint, it's not. So I think it has to be both. It has to be a good intention and a good result.
Yeah, the pathway to hell is paved with good intentions. Age old adage. I agree. I would say though that you can't consider something you were forced to do like a good deed done by you because you didn't choose to
Yeah,
do it.
it's I guess
I think there's a
yeah,
lot
like
of power in the
freedom is a
choice.
prerequisite for all of this because it allows you to make mistakes, but it allows you to not make mistakes also. Whereas if you're always forced to be perfect, how can you be perfect in like without knowing what messed up shit is?
Yeah, basically, yeah. It's like it's not impressive if you're watching like a robot or an AI like play chess against a normal person if they'd never blunder. It's like of course you're expecting that. It's more impressive when they do blunder, and you're like, what the hell?
In other words, let's not have a social credit score.
Where does that come in? I'd be interested to talk about that for
Well,
slightly different reasons, but
I mean, like the social credit score is like it coerces you to do air quotes good things.
oh yeah, yeah, okay. So
So,
that's the angle you're
so
taking.
yeah, that's like there's already like a social credit score in China. Like it's literally
No,
a
dude.
credit. Like if you do bad shit, your legitimate credit score goes down. You can't like borrow money or whatever.
Let's talk about that. That'd be a good sizable little chunk, and then we could probably close out the podcast after that. We could talk about this for a little while, because what I'm thinking is that if that was implemented, I've played enough video games to understand that there would very quickly be guides on YouTube for how to farm social credit score in the most efficient way possible, and that's what it would turn into. So it's like, is that good? Is that good that your society is like behaving like in probably best described as like a docile manner, like a quote unquote like good manner, just
Eh,
for the internet clout?
No, it's. I mean, it's not good. It goes like against the definition of everything we've established. Like it doesn't allow for freedom, and freedom is like the precursor to good. So without having freedom, you're just living this like perverted image of what somebody said was good. Like,
Yeah.
and the definition of what is like society says is good changes like all the time,
So
and
then,
ultimately, it's like a moving like yeah.
to my question, and this might be a really obvious like answer, but I'd be interested to hear you kind of ponder it for a second. If you have in any society where like just explicit like straight up freedom, is not allowed, is it always the fact then that somebody at the top who's basically like dictating what and what isn't allowed is benefiting from that? Or is it possible that restrictions on freedom can be placed for a like, quote unquote social benefit or like a collective benefit sort of thing? Or is there always a fat cat benefiting from stifled freedom? Because a lot of restrictions on freedom, like especially with like COVID, you see it play it out. Like they pitch them for like the collective benefit, right?
Well, in order to like enforce something of that magnitude, you by definition the party that is enforcing these rules, like regardless of not or whether they benefit for it, they're already in a more privileged position than the people they're enforcing the rules on, just because they can do that. So anything that happens, like it will benefit, like if it helps the populace by them enforcing these rules, the the enforcing party will like asymmetrically benefit from it too.
Okay, I think I understand what you're saying, and let me tell me if I do or not. So basically, what you're saying is like if I'm making a law that like basically everybody agrees is like um a quote unquote collective benefit, but it stifles liberties, it'd be very easy for me to go in there and tweak it just a tiny bit to where, if you're looking at this on like a stat scale, when you're like choosing your starting character or something and it shows you like, oh, this one has higher strength and then this one has lower strength but higher dexterity. So you're looking at it sort of like that. And it's like I can tweak up the personal gain for me maybe by 5 points, just tweak it up just a little bit, and maybe it takes freedom. It only stifles freedom another 0.2 points, so no one's gonna notice it. But then maybe it takes the other stat down a little bit. You're saying like that, where they can like kind of put these sub perceptible little kind of personal gains in there, and it's not really gonna, you know, be noticed when it ships with everything else.
Um,
They can slant it a
that's not
little bit in their
exactly what I was
favor.
getting at. What I was getting at is like something, or like if like the party in power, or let's just call it like for the sake of argument, let's call it the government. The government is in a privileged position in all times. So it almost doesn't even matter if they benefit from it or not. But if they do benefit from something, it'll be like an asymmetric gain compared to what society would benefit from. So like when when the government, let's say they put a lockdown on or whatever, the government now has more and more power to enforce more and more rules and to do what they want,
Yeah,
basically. It's a weird power dynamic, I guess. But like kind of like circling back to like, will they always benefit from this, and is it okay to um, give up freedom for some benefit? There's this
Ben
the
Franklin.
the fourth book in the Dune series is called God Emperor of Dune. Um, I'm not gonna like spoil all of it, but basically the Emperor of the Dune universe can like see the future, and basically he saw that the only way to ensure humanity's survival was to like get rid of all space travel, or like 99% of space travel for like 3,000 years. So then once he lifted the ban, like humanity would want to explore and like travel in space forever.
Interesting.
Basically like, but it ended up like not working in the long run. So I think I think it's not beneficial to stifle freedom for some perceived good, because he stifled the whole galaxy for 3,000 years to do what he thought would like preserve them forever, but it ended up really not working. And then that 3,000 years of people were basically slaves that had
Wasted.
to do with the
Yeah.
emperor like But they were basically at the whim of the emperor to get like supplies from space and like communicate with others and stuff. So I would say it's probably in most cases it's not beneficial to give up freedom for some perceived good.
Yeah, I mean Ben Franklin had a quote about that in uh freedom. You basically like don't give up freedom. If you give up freedom for safety, you don't deserve freedom or safety. I think was the TLDR.
Yeah, and that's
Those
like
who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Correct use of neither nor there. I like it. Ben Franklin's a G. I think he knew what he was talking about.
yeah, it's just like what I was saying with the asymmetric benefits. Like giving up my freedom, like lets the government do more stuff that they want to do. It just benefits them more and more to do stuff like that. That's so because who's to say when enough good has been achieved to get freedom back, right? Except for the
Yeah.
the governing party. It's I don't know, but it's a hard question though because there are times when I think it's good to try to live in a more arbitrarily, not arbitrarily, like a more restricted lifestyle in order to promote good or like benefits because like let's say like a
But
diet like
dude, back to
I'm
our
restricting myself
conversation.
to be healthier but I'm restricting
Yes, but
myself
you're
from good
choosing to
food.
do that. You're
Yeah,
choosing to
okay,
do that.
that's good point. Like I'm choosing to do that but like if you made me go on a diet like
That's what I've been saying this
yeah
whole time about the COVID stuff is the narrative should be, hey, look, this is the science. These are some concerns people have. And then, da 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 da, address the concerns with science. Boom, go do that. But we believe that it is in your best interest to do X, Y, and Z. Here are the reasons. Here are the resources. Explore it yourself. Go ape shit, whatever. But when you have a president of the United States that seriously considers mandating that every business over X amount of employees, which is basically every business in the United States, either vaxes up every single person on their workforce or they cease operations. Like that is borderline tyrannical. Actually, it might even be tyrannical. That's sort of really a big, stifling on like liberties, in my opinion, and opens the door for like a lot of future tomfoolery with mandated medicine or prophylaxis or
but yeah it's a hard
I
question.
I think as much a lot of I've learned you know like talking to people trying to like prove a point and like just shove it down their throat is never gonna work sort of thing. So what you should do is kind of come into the conversation seeking to understand their point versus like dismantle it sort of thing. So um I think a lot of people kind of like you know get that wrong with policies. Like no matter how much you believe in the science or your emotional argument or whatever, you're never going to get anywhere besides maybe like you said acutely beneficial as measured by numbers. You're never going to get anywhere by shoving what you believe down people's throats. So you have to explain it and come to a mutual understanding.
And
And
also, most of the time, people don't act logically. They act like irrationally and out of emotion. I think because it takes like a conscious effort to use reason and use your brain. Like your default like state is like knee jerk emotional reaction.
yeah.
Not you specifically, but I mean like everybody's is because that's just it was like a triumph of humanity over itself to like create the scientific method and stuff instead of just saying like I feel like if we don't sacrifice somebody the sun's not going to rise tomorrow.
Yeah, I just what troubles me about the whole um like public discourse nowadays is the fact that we're so connected yet so fragmented. Like we have unprecedented levels of connectedness in social media, yet people are so um surrounded by like yes men and unable to step out of their bubbles. But That's slightly off topic.
Yeah, I mean that just goes back to like like you don't want to hear logic, you just want to like feel good like about yourself or whatever. But logically, nobody can usually be 100% right or wrong. There's always ambiguities, and you're right except for this one time when you're not, but you don't want to be wrong, so
Yeah, well, it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to be wrong, and it's uncomfortable to challenge your views against people that hold different views. And going back to the freedom, topic that we're talking about, it's like making the choice to put yourself in an uncomfortable situation such that you can strengthen your understanding of a topic is, again, I think, a good choice. Something that you consciously sacrifice your short-term comfortability for knowledge or deeper understanding. That's a good choice that hinges off of the freedom to make said choice. And specifically the freedom, the human right detailed in the First Amendment, the freedom of assembly and speech.
yeah, I guess those dudes figured it out somehow, and
Yeah.
nobody else has figured that out before or since.
It is it is quite kind of concerning how I mean I've said this before about how the political sphere has changed from like these fucking rough and tough rootin' tootin' dudes that were preaching about liberties and freedoms and basic human rights, and nowadays it's like you just don't see that.
Well, I don't think they were like necessarily rough and tough, but they had like a true liberal education where like
No, they
the
were rough and tough, dude. Those were the first guys that came over. You had to be a special breed.
no, they weren't the first guys that came over. Like by the time 1776 or when was the Declaration written? 1780 something or whatever. Or no, that was Articles of Confederation.
I'm more so
1791. No,
referring
like
to
hold
the
on, hold on. Like I mean, those weren't the original rough and tough dudes that came over. That was like 100 years before that. These people that like wrote the Constitution were for the most part like very very educated individuals. I mean, they also like were farmers and soldiers and stuff, but they
yeah.
were
So
all
it's
very
the
well.
previous generation, one generation before, basically,
Yeah,
maybe
that those were
two.
the rough and tough dudes.
Yeah, I was just thinking that I was more so referring to like the zeitgeist at the time, the kind of shared like opinion and just how people were like that. That was just the type of person. And nowadays, it's like if you go and you pick the average person out of like a random spot on Earth, like you're an alien, you pick a random spot that's land, and then within that spot you pick a random person. It's like you're gonna find a smartphone on them. They're probably not gonna work out much. They don't know any combat training. They probably hardly know about international politics, maybe a little bit about American politics, but I'm sure it's severely one-sided if they were an American. So it's like it's just completely changed from like the frontiersmen, pioneer sort of guys that were fending off Native Americans and developing, working with the land, developing civilizations, dealing with sicknesses.
Yeah, I
It's
guess
a
I
little
mean it was more
different
like do or
nowadays.
die. Like it was literally do or die, but there's not really that many do or die situations in modern
There's
society.
a there's another quote I heard recently. Let me try to remember it. It was something along the lines of like, uh, I'll have to look it up exactly. But essentially, the sentiment was that periods of comfort breed cowards, and then if you have periods of discomfort after those, you're going to be in a bad place because your war is going to be fought by cowards.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like maybe that's true, but I feel like people rise up to the occasion when they have to.
A nation that makes a great distinction between its scholars and its warriors will have its laws made by cowards and its wars fought by fools. It's slightly different, but that was Thucydides.
Yeah, he wrote the history of the Peloponnesian War. I mean,
Oh,
yeah,
okay,
I mean, like
okay.
that's a good statement and all. I don't like it's a very abstract generalization though, but I
I
agree
think,
with the
but I think
sentiment, I suppose.
I think it kind of covers that like that frontiersman jack of all trades, like being like you said, like classically trained, like liberal scholar, and then also just like having the knowledge and the ability to like I guess function in a society where like working with your hands and doing that sort of stuff is like very valuable. Like it's not looked upon as like, oh, like did you even complete high school, like
Yeah.
sort of thing. So I don't know. That's a good one. There's also another quote about like what a great shame it is for a man to grow old and never see like what his body can become, sort of thing. So basically like just being fat your whole life, like
Yeah,
not
Socrates,
seeing
I
what you
think.
can achieve
Socrates.
physically.
Which like I feel like Socrates was like skinny fat though. Like he said that stuff, but I don't think
That
he was
no,
about it. I can't
I
remember for sure.
possibly, but the so
Or
what we
maybe he
learned
did
in
though. I don't know. Like
no,
I've
listen,
seen both. I've seen
I
things that
got
said he was an athlete, and I've seen things that said he was like a fat dude. Or like
I haven't read any of the accounts, but specifically with regards to statues of him and any other imagery and the history of art, they taught us a lot about idealized images of people in different periods. So, for example, there was a period, and I think it was like Egyptian or maybe like Middle Eastern art, where basically they made you look like really skinny upper torso, and then it almost looked like you were pregnant. Like they'd make a really kind of round belly, and that's not how people looked at all back in the day, but that's how it was like idealized, kind of like on Instagram where like they make their butts and boobs all big and whatnot, but slightly different. So there's like these statue motifs that sculptors would sculpt people in, and it wasn't necessarily trying to reflect reality, but it was like the style at the time, sort of thing. So I don't know if that's the case specifically with any of the Greek philosophers, where it's like they didn't actually.
yeah. Oh, I know. Like or like just about Socrates specifically, I heard that he was like a skinny fat dude. He didn't actually do anything. But like like I said, I also heard that he was like a badass wrestler dude too. I don't know. I haven't done research it enough to be honest.
Yeah. Dude, in other news, fucking fake news, apparently the ghost of Kiev wasn't real.
Yeah, I think we
I
talked about
think it's a
this.
lot of
I want
very
to believe in
strong
it though.
evidence. No, there's very strong evidence that it's not real. I can't believe in good faith anymore. Too much cognitive dissonance.
Eh, it's a good story.
It is a good
That's
story.
important. I think that's important.
Yeah, but I think a lot of the Greeks had it figured out with regards to just like basic philosophy.
Um, I mean, they definitely, if you follow like those tenets, I think you live a better life than somebody who doesn't. I, I think, I think at the very least that's true.
Yeah, I would be. I need to get into some of those readings. You need to recommend me all the good ones you've read because I want to. It's easy for me to conceptualize a lot of the tenets of probably various differing philosophies in like similar ages. But I'm sure there's great distinction to be made between like a lot of different philosophical stances
Yeah, well, I mean, like
from.
early Greek philosophy was like, yo, everything's made out of like fire, and then some dude was like, nah, you're wrong. Everything's made out of like fire, air, water, and earth. And then yeah,
And it was
you know what I mean. Like
foul
it didn't,
blood.
they didn't come to these like conclusions about how to live your life for a while because they were like they were trying to figure out like what stuff was. I don't know. It's kind of like a not very straightforward progression of stuff. So
I think there's value to be had in a lot of like. Okay, so imagine this: observations that people make are automatically valuable. It doesn't matter if you document an observation well, and then you document kind of the um surrounding characteristics of the phenomenon, like how it happened, what you think made it happen, without the preconceived idea of like the modern scientific method. Those are extremely valuable observations, and they might come to some wacky conclusion like Yep. We have concluded that you get tired because the ground, since you're glued to the ground, the blood gets lower in your body throughout the day, and then once it reaches your feet, you have to lay horizontally so it can go back to your head. Like maybe they reached some wacky conclusion, but the underlying observation was that humans get tired, sort of thing, and then they
Yeah.
document also like, oh well, we see that the sun goes down, and sort of so like seeing some of these like primitive observations through lenses that aren't, the lens that we use every day, I think can give us some really valuable insights into things that we can meld with our modern understanding of like science, physiology, et cetera, et cetera. You agree or do you not agree?
I think I agree to the extent that most of the things that they observed are problems that we still have. So even if the reason for the problem was, or like what they thought the reason was different, maybe we can learn something from the solutions
Yeah.
they had. I think.
So a better example I have is in Eastern like ancestral medicine slash nutrition, there's this concept of the doctrine of signatures. So like it's basically like if a food kind of looks like a certain thing, then it's probably like good for that, human function. So if you take a walnut, for example, you're looking at a walnut, like a whole walnut without the well, I don't know, even the shell kind of looks like this, but a walnut kind of looks like a brain. Walnuts are actually very high in acetylcholine precursors, a lot of neurotransmitter precursors. Specifically, I think the catecholamines, which is I think like acetylcholine, dopamine, not serotonin because that comes from tryptophan. But anyway, it kind of looks like a brain. Turns out it's good for your brain. Is it good for your brain because it looks like a brain? Probably not. But is there some room and belief for like maybe like God created it that way to give us a hint? Like, yeah, sure. So this whole doctrine of signatures kind of carries through a lot more foods. You take a carrot and you slice it sideways, like a long carrot, and you're looking at the circular cross section. It kind of looks like an eyeball if you squint hard enough and you have enough liquor in you, right? Turns out retinol, vitamin A, or yeah, A precursors, good for the eyes. So, there's a few more like tomatoes. They kind of look like bronchioles. I think they're good for like blood and lungs. So there's a lot of kind of truth hidden in there, despite the fact that the reasoning's a bit convoluted and nonsensical when you look at it through an imperialistic, scientific standpoint.
Yeah, I think you meant to say empirical, right?
Yeah, 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 not imperial. With an E, not an I.
Yeah. I don't know. Shit's complicated though. I guess it's more about like what not to do rather than what to do.
Yeah. But I think and kind of more so what I meant by that is like if in history people are like, yo, we do this and it's working for us, and the reason we do this is because of insert wacky reason here, well, it's pretty easy for us now to look back and just disregard the wacky conclusion they came to, but kind of, this is something that we should investigate. They say carrots are good for the eyes. Well, why are they good for the eyes? Let's look into it. And nowadays we can say, oh, well, we know of this biochemical process that turns this molecule into this molecule, and this molecule is good for your eyes. So, eureka, we found it. So,
So basically, just listen to what your grandma tells you.
exactly. And then dig further. Only listen to the first part. But, yeah, so I think at least my perception of, like freedom being the highest good and like my definition of freedom and where I believe it falls into goodness happening, I guess, has definitely changed over the course of this episode. Hearing you describe it as like a kind of a prerequisite for good to happen, but also a prerequisite for evil, kind of in the same breath. So
Yeah,
thanks for that. That's a good
I
perspective.
didn't even think I didn't even think of it like that until we talked about it either. Because I thought freedom was the highest good, but like when we started to dig into it,
Yeah.
it's not.
And again, I think it depends. Like I said, I think as a ruler or a king or a president, freedom's the highest good that you can give to your people. That's the great, as a god. That's the well, actually, that's another interesting. If we want to get into that, God didn't try to give. Well, no, he did. He gave him freedom. He said like, "Yo, don't eat the apple, but like if you want to, like, bad things are gonna happen." So freedom, I think freedom's like the highest good that you can give to your people or like people that you oversee. But as a person, just having freedom, again, I don't think, like you said,
Yeah.
it's not really good. And then the gravity thing, that was also really cool too. That's a really nice analogy.
Yeah, I've been like working on this blog post about it. That's why like I had this like very long and coherent monologue about it because I've been thinking about it a lot in recent days. So
Oh yeah. You want to end it here or go on a little longer?
I think I'm good to end it here.
All right, sweet. Episode 7 in the bags.
Yep, and we'll see all of you millions of fans next week.